an intellectually insulting gesture towards you because I know you can all read very well. But I was so impressed with this article that I want it entered into the record here within the context of this conversation, and that's the reason that I'm going to read it. Dated March 12, 2010 by Dr. Alan Sabrosky, The Dark Face of Jewish Nationalism. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu once remarked to a Likud gathering that, quote, Israel is not like other countries, unquote. Oddly enough for him, that time he was telling the truth, and nowhere is that more evident than with Jewish nationalism, whether or not one pins the, quote, Zionist label on it or not. Nationalism in most countries and cultures can have both positive and negative aspects, unifying a people and sometimes leading them against their neighbors. Extremism can emerge, and often has, at least in part, in almost every nationalist independence movement I can recall, such as the French nationalist movement had the terror, quote-unquote, Kenya's had the Mau Mau, etc. But whereas extremism in other nationalist movements is an aberration, extremism in Jewish nationalism is the norm, pitting Zionist Jews, secular or observant, against the Goyim, meaning non-Jews or everyone else, who are either possible predator or certain prey, if not both sequentially. This does not mean that all Jews or all Israelis feel and act this way by any means, but it does mean that Israel today is what it cannot avoid being and what it would be under any electable government. The difference between Jewish nationalism, known as Zionism, and that of other countries and cultures here, I think, are fourfold. 1. Zionism is a real witch's brew of xenophobia, racism, ultranationalism, and militarism that places it way outside of a, quote, mere nationalist context. For example, when I was in Ireland, both parts, I saw no indication whatsoever that the Provisional Irish Republican Army or anyone else pressing for a united Ireland had a shred of design on shoving Protestants into camps or out of the country, although there may have well been a handful who thought that way, and goes far beyond the misery for others professed by the Nazis. 2. Zionism undermines civic loyalty. This is very important, ladies and gentlemen. I hate to break the cadence here, but pay attention to this. Zionism undermines civic loyalty among its adherents in other countries in a way that other nationalist movements and even ultranationalist movements like Nazism did not, such as a large majority of American Jews, including those who are not openly dual citizens, espouse a form of political bigamy called, quote, dual loyalty to Israel and to the U.S., that is every bit as dishonest as marital bigamy. Attempts to finesse the precedents they give to Israel over the U.S., lots of Rahm Emanuels out there who served in the Israeli army but not, underline not, in the U.S. Armed Forces, and has absolutely no parallel in the sense of national or cultural identity espoused by any other definable ethnic or racial group in America. Even the Nazi Bund in the U.S. disappeared once Germany and the U.S. went to war, with almost all of its members volunteering for the U.S. Armed Forces. 3. The, quote, enemy of normal nationalist movements is the occupying power and perhaps its allies, and once independence is achieved, normal relations with the occupying power are truly the norm. But for Zionism, almost everyone out there is either an actual or potential enemy, differing only in proximity and placement on its very long list of enemies, which is now America's target list. And 4, almost all nationalist movements, including the irredentist and secessionist variants, intend to create an independent state from a population in place or to reunite a separated people like the Sudeten Germans in the 1930s. It is very rare for it to include the wholesale displacement of another indigenous population, which is far more common of successful colonialist movements as in the U.S., and perhaps a reason why most Americans would not care too much about what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians, even if they did know about it, is because that it is, in effect, no different than what Europeans in North America did to the Indians, Native Americans here in a longer and more low-tech fashion. The implications of this for Middle East peace prospects and for other countries in thrall to their domestic Jewish lobbies or not are chilling. The book of Deuteronomy, and for those of you out there who do not know what the book of Deuteronomy is, that is part of the Old Testament. I think it's, let's see, there's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, I think it's the fourth book of the Old Testament.
It is. It's part of the Pentateuch, one of the five books of Judaism.
Okay. The book of Deuteronomy comes to life in a state with a nuclear arsenal would be enough to give pause to anyone not bought or bribed into submission, which these days encompasses the U.S. government given Israel's affinity for throwing crap into the face of the Obama administration and Obama's visible affinity for accepting it with a smile. Bibi Netanyahu's own, quote, Uncle Tom come to Washington. The late General Moshe Dayan, who, Zionist or not, remains an honored part of the pantheon of military heroes, allegedly observed that Israel's security depended upon it being viewed by others as a, quote, mad dog. He may have been correct, but he neglected to note that the preferred response of everyone else is to kill that mad dog before it can decide to go berserk and bite. It is an option worth considering. So writes Alan Sabrosky, Ph.D., former Director of Studies at the U.S. Army War College. Dr. Sabrosky, I cannot think of an article that I have read in recent memory that basically sums up the problem that we are dealing with right now as accurately and as succinctly as this essay that you have written. You have, for all intents and purposes, nailed this thing on the head. And I guess the reason why I got so excited over this article, Doctor, is because one of the things that I have noted about the problem that we're dealing with in terms of Zionism, the power of the Jewish lobby and whatnot, is that everything is shrouded in some type of confusion or mystery. Okay, and I think deliberately so. I think that one of the biggest components to this powerful foreign interest being able to get as far as it has, I mean, let's face it, it got away with attacking a United States ship for close to 2 hours, killing 34 men. This was an act of war. They got away with it. Not only did they get away with it, they were rewarded with $3 billion a year minimum. When we look at the two wars that the United States finds herself in and on the cusp of at least two others, and all of this for the benefit of a certain foreign country sitting on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean Sea, they have been wildly successful at bringing all of this about. And I think one of the main components of this is the fact that very few people really understand the nature of the problem. And I think that your article here basically lays out the problem, which is that when you have people who try to make this claim that they are loyal to America and at the same time loyal to a foreign government, it is a lie.
It is, and it's more than that, Mark. What we need to stand up and say is not only did they attack the USS Liberty, they did 9/11. Mm-hmm. They did it. I have had long conversations over the past 2 weeks with contacts at the Army War College, at Headquarters Marine Corps, and I've made it absolutely clear in both cases that it is 100% certain that 9/11 was a Mossad operation. Mm-hmm. Period. Mm-hmm. Phil, I don't denigrate what happened to USS Liberty in the slightest. You understand that. But for most Americans, what happened to the USS Liberty or in Vietnam was history. Mm-hmm. This is history. They can be concerned about it, but they're not going to get mad about it.
Right.
9/11 has led directly to 60,000 Americans dead and wounded. God knows how many hundreds of thousands of people in other